we added a couple phrases to the title. So this title is now Precarious Professionalism, High-Skill Workers, Collective Voice in American Healthcare and Higher Education. So the focus is now, or it has always been decidedly on high-skill workers, but we wanted to make that clear in the title. Okay, so let's get the introduction down. So this paper is aimed for Political Science Journal, and there's this discussion in political science about the broader systems of social solidarity and what drives them, what drives their crises, and what drives resilience and responses to their crises. So the frame that's often used to think about them is the frame of the knowledge economy. And with that frame, there are two factors that really come out as putting welfare states, or if you want to use a broader term, systems of institutionalized solidarity, if two factors that really put them under pressure. One is institutional liberalization, and that tends to be defined as the introduction of market elements in place of political allocations of resources, as well as SBTC, skill-based technological change. That means that the skill sets of well-educated folks are more compatible with technological change, and they will see increasing returns. So but in line with that framing, two factors have been named as supporting the continued strengths of welfare states. First, it's society's collective capacities as a strength of resilience. That means basically that collective action in some form or other can be organized to underwrite social solidarity. Of course, unions are a strong measure of that as they organize workers, but it could also be civil society organizations, and it's a broader concept. Secondly, writers have really emphasized the importance of decisions that high-skill workers make, because they have benefited from these changes that are happening in the knowledge economy. And to make that point, to illustrate the point, we just have to look at income inequality that has increased, and how incomes, not just of the 0.1% and then 0.001%, but also of the top 10, top 20% have increased. And those are the college-educated ones that would see the higher returns to their education in a knowledge-based economy. So, but really, research hasn't looked at how these factors interact. And we want to look at collective self-governance by educated professionals as an area in which these two factors really strongly interact and have an immediate impact on the evolution of welfare states, because it's in welfare state services that we see this phenomenon of collective self-governance by highly educated professionals. Okay, so we want to do that in the US and in two sectors, US healthcare and higher education. Here, we see very great tensions between private capital accumulation and public welfare efforts. That is essentially the increase of capitalistic forces under liberalization and the continued attempts by the American welfare state to provide these services to a broad share of the population in the spirit of social citizenship. So these services have seen far-reaching liberalization, and they now account for a quarter of GDP. So they're seen as really growth drivers for the post-industrial knowledge economy. But as they have grown into these core economic sectors, they remain welfare services that are half financed by public funds and bind a third of net federal spending for functions of social investment and support for social reproduction. So they're really these tensions between growth and social service provision, and most of the costs in this sector are labor costs. So the tensions in terms of boosting growth and providing security, they manifest in the working conditions of these high-skilled professionals, including at the top of the sectoral status hierarchies, that is doctors and academics. And In contrast to this broader framing that these are just always winners, what we actually see in these two professions is that there's a strong polarization between winners and losers. So there are some people who have really seen income increases that far outstrip average income increases, and others have seen a lot of precarity. And as that happens, the self-governance that has long been guaranteed is experiencing centrifugal forces, because the members of these organizations, or at least the constituencies of self-governance organizations, they start having diverging economic interests. Let me just illustrate some of the movement that has happened. So here is a chart showing you how the number of doctors in the US has increased. That's total number of physicians. That's the green bars. But the share of independent physicians has drastically decreased. So as 25 years ago, there were still a majority of doctors were still independent. They were essentially self-employed. So this was in line with the way that physicians traditionally understood their professional freedom, which was about basically making their own decision, also being economically independent. But we see an increasing consolidation of provider organizations, influx of private equity, healthcare organizations, a variety of factors that we don't have time to go into. But we essentially see that workers increasingly become employees, so much so that the majority now is clearly in the employee camp. In higher education, we see, of course, compared to the 1960s, a drastic reduction in the share of tenure-track faculty from what was once 2/3, 3/4, to even at research universities, less than half, and across the whole sector, probably like 25% to maybe a third, depending on how you count it. So there also the employment conditions and the distribution of jobs has drastically changed. So in this research, we ask, can doctors and academics maintain an inclusive and impactful collective voice? And as subsidiary questions, we're interested in what drives their different responses, and how do their responses affect welfare states' ability to decommodify the citizenry. So our argument has multiple parts. I just put them up all on here, so it's a bit long. We focus on the concept of precarious professionalism that we see as being realized in both sectors. It's a concept that emphasizes that precarity has spread from the conditions of work for losers of structural change. That is, for instance, in academia, the Rhodes Scholars, the adjuncts who teach one class in one university and another class in another university for fixed sums. But it has spread to the entire edifice of associational self-governance. That's our argument and the concept that we emphasize. So, and neither the American Medical Association nor the American Association of University Professors still wields strong influence for the benefit of most of the profession. So for us, functional professionalism is one where self-governance is both impactful, so it has a strong influence, and it is used in inclusive ways for the profession. But now we see the AMA and the AAUP only delivering on one of those characteristics. And they do so as they have aborted a traditionally neutral stance on class politics to take sides. So the AMA we interpret as having become an employer-aligned trade association with strong influence but very low representativeness. And the AAUP has turned into a union on activist organization fighting worker exploitation, unfortunately with low impact, but with a strong degree of representativeness. And historically, we see these responses coming about through very strong institutional sources. Both professions saw professional privileges being institutionalized after World War II as welfare states expanded through what in the US political economy literature is called delegated state building. Both associations were needed in the service of expanded welfare state services, increased public funding. They were co-opted, but academics, their powers were not as strongly institutionalized as for workers. Academics were guaranteed professional freedoms, academic freedom, largely through universities signing up informally to these norms. There was no legal incorporation of these norms. And thus, as universities, which even longer ago were incorporated as kind of autocratic organizations ruled by boards of governors, as they aborted their commitment to these norms, the academics couldn't call on these powers anymore, and their professional voice became increasingly precarious, and they turned into a union organization as very much as a matter of strategy. The employers, however, the doctors, however, they were able to really control parameters of their profession, including access to jobs, regulation of employment, codes of coding for diseases, etc. And they have been able to blossom economically as an association, really being integrated in the system, but they have become ever less representative of what workers actually, what doctors actually want. So today, they only have 15% of doctors as members rather than 75%, and most doctors saying that the AMA doesn't speak for them anymore. So at the core of this paper sits this table that shows that we have two types of precarious professionalism with different combinations of impact and representativeness. We're still not in the quadrant of eroded professionalism because it's still there, it still matters, but it is not supporting as much as in the past the decommodification of the citizenry. I do have slides that show you some of the points that I made, but I think my time is up and I just leave it at this.